Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Cthulhu, Death May Die. We're also going to be talking about some games that have been on our table this week. Chris will be talking about Can't Stop and his take on Agricola since he missed our review last week. Adam's going to be talking about Space Empires 4X. And I'll be talking about the Mistwood expansion for Everdell and Last Will. But before we jump into a description of Cthulhu, Death May Die, I also have some poll results to discuss today. Every week on Twitter, I ask a poll, and if you'd like to follow and respond and interact with the poll, you can find us at BG_hot takes. The poll that I asked this week: do you prefer cooperative or competitive board games generally? The reason I asked this is because this is our first cooperative board game that we've featured on the Board Game Hot Takes podcast after 116 episodes. So wanted to get a take for how our audience, what they prefer to play, whether they're into co-ops or competitive. Here are the answers that I got. 21.2% said they prefer cooperative games. 73.6% said they prefer competitive games. And I left one more option, and that was solo. And 5.2% said they preferred solo games over either of those scenarios. How did you guys answer this?
I put competitive board games for this one. That's my jam. I like a little edge of competition. I like getting a group together, a little smack talk. I think that interaction's fun. We did try this cooperative game tonight, and I guess for cooperative games, I look at those more as solo games. I've tried Spirit Island with a couple other people, and everyone was confused. Everyone was like, "What? We're not playing against each other. We're trying to collectively work together to fight against these white pieces of plastic. What's going on here? It doesn't make sense. How do I get the most points and beat you?" is what they wanted to know. So yeah, I prefer competitive games.
Yeah, I'm with Adam. This is a hands down competitive games every time. Like Adam said, it's the competition. The competition is one of the main reasons I play games. And there's other reasons too, but really it's about, going head to head with folks and trying to score the most points, which doesn't mean that there's no place for cooperative games, because they can be a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun, or at least I had a lot of fun playing this game tonight. They're great to play with family or young children or people who don't necessarily play these kind of games and so don't mind a little bit of coaching to help them through it. And there's always the fact that the cooperative games tend to be story focused, tend to be more enjoyable in that perspective in terms of theme. I think theme is great, so that is one thing that I find very attractive about cooperative games. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I'm always going to pick competitive over cooperative.
Yeah, I answered the same way. I definitely prefer competitive. I almost never want to play cooperative. We played a cooperative game tonight. It's a game I actually happen to like, but to be honest, I'd rather play it solo. I liked it just fine with you guys, but there's just something about just playing against a random deck of cards as a group. It doesn't feel like it has much impact. I don't get as much enjoyment out of doing this activity as I would playing competitive and kind of, playing against your brains. This is kind of how I feel with some games about solo versus competitive as well. Like I can play a solo mode that maybe even acts like a competitive, but I'd rather play against other people. And, I don't know, just it's more fulfilling for me. So yeah, definitely prefer competitive games.
Yeah, what about a game like Cerebria where it's like 2 versus 2, or there's, I think, Guards of Atlantis. You could go like 4-on-4 or 5-on-5. You could play games like that. Any interest in those where it's, like team sports?
Nope.
Chris was a big no. No doubt. No, I definitely prefer that. Although, I still think that the experience of collaborating with someone, what I like team games is like card games where you don't have information that you can share with your opponents. And I even think that that's the way we should have played or should play Cerebria, is if you're going to play a team, like be, collaborating, but don't talk about it. Don't like work together with your decisions. You make your decisions with the information on your hand and your turn. I make the decisions with my hand and my turn. Hopefully we're both making smart decisions, but we're still competing against somebody. And I think that that's a fun way to play a team game.
I'm going to come back to one of Chris's favorite games, that's Spades, where it's a trick taker and your teammates with a person across the table from you. That is one of my favorite games. I absolutely love that game because you're doing this collective bid. You're working as a team to try to hit the right mark. And that's one game that does it for me. I can't think of many others where I enjoy that kind of situation, but Spades rocks my world.
By the way, I just want to be clear that that was sarcasm Adam was using when he said it was one of my favorite games.
I grew up playing this game called Hand and Foot, which I think is like a rummy variant, and it is a team game, and that's always fun for me too, because you don't get to help your opponent make decisions. In fact, there's always like no table talk, right? Is yelled across the table when you're kind of giving hints, but there's decisions you're making that you're hoping is the right decision, but since you don't know what the other player has in their hand, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and that's part of the fun of it. Like, oh, they just messed me up and they're on my team. So I actually do like team games, but I don't like team games where they can be played kind of cooperatively in a way where it's, where there's a lot of working together on the decision. I think that's what I generally don't like about cooperative games, to be honest. It just slows everything down. It's like, now I gotta listen to 3 other people have their input before I make the decision. Oh, now it wasn't even my turn. Like, I didn't even make a decision here. Somebody else made it for me. That's no fun. So yeah. All right. Well, here's what some people said that responded to the poll. And again, if you don't follow us on Twitter, actually want to be on that place anymore, you can follow us at BG_hot takes. And if you respond to the poll, we'll read some of the answers on the show. The first one was Never Say Die. This is Chris, a regular listener and somebody I've had a chance to play games with before. He said, I'll play anything, but definitely prefer competitive, as I like to find my own strategies without having to compromise. Having said that, I do think I'm actually a better gamer as part of a team. I collaborate well and never want to be the reason my side lost. That's an interesting take. So he prefers playing competitive, but thinks he's a stronger player cooperatively. Riley Stock said, I love me some co-op. It's fun to be able to work together towards a goal and win or fail together. I found less feelings get hurt, and losing can be even more unifying than winning. The post-discussion of exciting moments and what we could try differently next go. He mentioned the idea of hurt feelings, and I think this has a lot to do with who you play with. And I've actually heard this from people who like cooperative games a lot. And usually it's either somebody who, just doesn't want to be competitive. They don't feel good being in that space, or it's somebody who plays with people who don't like being competitive. And I get the impression from other conversations with Riley that his wife is very competitive, and she doesn't handle loss well. And so if you're in a regular gaming situation with somebody like that, then I think cooperative probably is going to be more fun for everybody at the table if you're dealing with them. Room Escape Artist, which this is David. He said, co-op with friends, competitive with strangers. That's an interesting take. He enjoys the experience with friends, but doesn't want to cooperate with strangers. And then Trish said, while I love a good solo co-op puzzle, ultimately the best game nights are about player interaction and engagement. Competitive games tend to bring that out more consistently. Yeah, totally agreed on that one, Trish. Last comment here. This is Brian Chandler. You've obviously curated a competitive cutthroat audience. Co-op rules. All right, Brian. So, all right. Well, let's jump into a description of Cthulhu Death May Die.
In Cthulhu Death May Die, 1 to 5 players are paranormal investigators trying to stop the destruction of our world by thwarting a demonic ritual meant to summon ancient evil. Fail to stop the ritual, and you'll be facing down the biggest and baddest of the great old ones made famous by author H.P. Lovecraft, including the ever-popular Cthulhu himself. Of course, this being the 1920s, our intrepid heroes are confronting these cosmic horrors with nothing more than a Tommy gun, a good left hook, and a prayer. And as it turns out, sometimes that's all you need. Each game of Cthulhu Death May Die is an episode in which the players choose a combination of story, mission, heroes, and great old ones, thereby creating a nearly infinite number of scenarios. Because each mission is different, the goals differ slightly from game to game. Each round, players take a series of basic actions, like moving, attacking, investigating, and the like, with each turn also accompanied by some action by the Automa-controlled villains, monsters, cultists, and great old ones, usual suspects, and with each turn, the ritual comes closer and closer to completion. If the players prevail before the cultists finish their evil deeds, the great old one is forced onto the board and is vulnerable to attack. If the ritual is completed, the great old one materializes, and now the heroes have a whole new mess to contend with. They were just taking shots at puny little humans, now they're taking aim at the eldritch horrors that the cultists have summoned, and they can't win unless they manage to take out that big boss. Each character is unique, and in one particularly interesting twist, each hero comes complete with a psychosis that can either give them powers beyond belief or send them to an early grave. But hey, when you're messing with these types of ancient powers, what did you expect? Cthulhu Death May Die was designed by Eric Lang and Rob Dabbio and is published by Simon Games.
All right, welcome back. So just a little background on our experience with Cthulhu Death May Die. I've played this game about 20 times, probably about 10 times cooperatively and about 10 times solo. Chris, I think, has had probably a pretty similar experience. But Adam, this was just your second play, I believe, right?
Yeah, Tim, that's correct. Just my second play.
Okay. One other note is that we are focusing on the original game of Cthulhu Death May Die, which came out several years back, came with a couple different seasons of different scenarios. And there is currently a new season. Season 3 is up on Kickstarter right now. We intentionally are focusing on the core game because this will be a little bit more timeless no matter which version you get. But after we have our feature discussion, I'm going to just talk about a couple of the things that are added into the new Fear of the Unknown version, which is season 3, and some of the components that are there. We didn't play with those tonight, but I think they're pretty interesting and they're modular, so they can be added into the original content as well. So let's start with gameplay and mechanisms, and I'll kick us off here. I think my favorite part of this game, now this is a very classic Eric Lang streamlined design, feels similar in some ways as far as the board layout to something like Blood Rage, where you have a few simple tracks you're managing. But I think my favorite part about it is that each investigator has one very unique ability. It's not visible on any other investigator, and then they've got a couple other abilities that may be on other investigators. They're kind of shared. They could be on any of them. Some very common traits. What's cool about this is every time you get to a certain point on your madness track, you're going to choose one of those attributes to increase, to improve on, and so your skills are going to kind of grow over the course of the game. And that's always fun. It's always fun to see what they do and playing with different characters and getting to play around with those abilities.
The Madness track is cool, Tim. The way each different player gets these little special abilities as the game goes on, that's very cool. And they grow in insanity and strength. Very cool. What's also mad, Chris mentioned it in the rules description, is the number of permutations possible with this game. You have, I don't know how many different characters there are, something like 30, it looked like. And then I don't know how many different scenarios are, another 30. And then how many different monsters are there? I don't know. But, looking at 30 cubed, that's like 27 with a bunch of zeros on it. So that's how many different variations of this game that you could play. I think that's pretty neat the way they design this all to fit together and to make sure, I'm sure some scenarios don't quite balance, but more or less, I'm sure all these characters and scenarios kind of balance and you get different gameplay from all these different situations. I think that's very clever game design right there.
The modular nature of this thing is absolutely awesome. Just tonight is a perfect example because we started playing this game on Tabletop Simulator and we had a problem with the mod where we had one great old one that we started with, but then 2 or 3 turns in, we had to change and go with a new great old one. And it was a different game. I mean, just from changing out the monster, we were playing a whole different game with a slightly different strategy, all kinds of different monsters going on. I mean, it's really cool. And there really is an infinite number of options. I mean, I think I've played scenario 1 because I'm a very linear kind of person. I want to do 1 and then 2 and then 3. I think I've played scenario 1 like 5 times, but I keep switching up the monsters. And every time I do that, it's a whole different experience. And I think that's great. But I also want to take a step back and mention what you guys said on the insanity track. That is the idea of powering up isn't that unique in board games. But I think because I find the idea of insanity just sort of fascinating in a game, the fact that they were tying this into the insanity, the fact that you power up as you get more and more insane, I think is so thematically cool. Like, for example, I think, Adam, you had the brawling nun, and every time you went up on the insanity track, she got to do more and more brawling. I mean, you get rolling more dice and being able to apply hits to multiple monsters. And it's such a cool idea. And then along those same lines, each character also has a randomly dealt psychosis. And the psychosis triggers every time you hit one of those main spots on your insanity track. It's triggered and it has some impact on the game. So, for example, today, my psychosis was codependency. And Adam was my codependent partner. And I was so sad when he died because then I was so lonely. But if when I triggered that, he wasn't on the same space as me, I took stress and then I had to move wherever he was. Or if I was in the same space as him, I didn't take stress. So thematically, it's just such a cool thing. I love that part of the story. And I think that's probably the thing more than all the other aspects of this game that stands out to me as just so fun and interesting.
Those psychoses cards are always interesting because they're dealt out randomly at the beginning of the game. So every game, no matter what character you're playing with, you could have a different psychoses, and it's a different little puzzle to play around. And it's cool because sometimes they're good to trigger, at the right time. Whether it's when one of your co-players are in the room with you, one of the monsters are in the room with you. For example, I was playing with fear of crowds. So if I was alone when I hit that insanity level, then it was great. It healed some stress for me. But if I was in a room with anybody else, a monster, my co-players, what is the right word for that? My partners? I don't know.
Teammates?
My teammates.
Sorry. It doesn't feel right saying that word out of my mouth.
If I was in the room with my teammates, then I would heal my stress. So and then Adams had kleptomania. So basically, if he's in a room with one of the other investigators, he steals an object for one of us. So really thematic and fun. But there's a whole stack of these. You're going to get different ones every time you play. Now, what I want to talk about a little bit is the pacing of this game, and two elements of it. There's some positive and some negative, but going along with that, there is also the possibility of player elimination in this game. I think it handles it really well. First of all, the pace of the game starts out pretty interesting. Like any co-op game that has a build-up of random events happening, it feels kind of easy at the beginning. You're killing off monsters, there's not a lot of stress, starting to get some of the objectives done. But about 20 to 30 minutes in, you're about to accomplish that kind of the main goal of the game, which is to disrupt the ritual. And the timing on that feels good. Monsters are starting to build up. It's starting to get a little bit tougher, but you're finally going to do it. If you don't do it, though, if things have gotten too rough before you're able to disrupt that ritual, then the great old one can come out, and that gets really tough. But if one of you dies before that point in the game, before you disrupt the ritual, the game's over. And that's cool because it means that somebody can't be eliminated super early in the game, which could happen, and then have everyone else play for an hour. So that's a really nice feature. Now, if you can disrupt the ritual and then the great old one's out on the board and then somebody dies, then you keep playing. But the timing on that isn't so bad because you still, you only have 20 to 30 minutes left in the game. Somebody's not sitting out for too long. So they did a nice job of allowing player elimination, allowing the stress of I can lose my character, I could die here, I got to manage that, but without making somebody completely kicked out of the game early. The problem with the pacing, though, is that after you get past that first goal, which is kind of one of the fun parts about the game, running around trying to follow these objectives. In this particular game, our objective was to strap dynamite on some moose and try to send them up onto an alien ship and blow up the ship. So it was hilarious. It was funny to do that. And so the objective was fun. Once we disrupted the ritual, that objective went away. And then your whole objective is to just take out the great old one. The problem is, I think that the game it goes a little long. It overstays its welcome once that part comes on. And every single time I play it, I always feel like it takes about twice as long to do that second half of the game than it does to do the first half. And it's just a little bit less fun. Now, it does get fun because your characters are really starting to ramp up. They're starting to get more powerful. You're doing these big rolls of dice. And so that can be fun too. But I think it overstays its welcome just a tad bit on the back end, but starts out pacing pretty well.
Yeah, Tim, I agree. I think the downtime got a little long for some of these turns. You're even trying to expedite some of these turns with assisting with the dice rolls and going over here and doing this. And you were kind of speeding it along, but still, the time between turns took a while. But I think we are burying the lead here. By far, the best part of this game for me was the storytelling aspect of it. It's almost a role playing game. You have all these different characters doing all these wacky things. It's a very thematic game. We'll get into that in a second, but the storytelling, the adventures, the crazy stuff that happens. Ernest Hemingway was Chris's character, and he said that he was codependent. Well, your grief must have been very waning, Chris, because you got over that so quickly. You went there and then shot up some monsters, and you didn't seem to care about it too much. And it's moments like that that just are hilarious to me. And yeah, strapping dynamite on the moose and have him get tractor beamed up into the alien spaceship and blow up. It's just hilarious stuff like that can happen in this game. And that's the game that you're going to play. It's going to be a fun romp, a ridiculous story where just crazy stuff is going to happen. It's different than most of the games that we play, a lot different than most of the games that we play. And if you go into it looking for that kind of fun, it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, Adam's absolutely right. I mean, the storytelling in this game in particular that we played tonight was absolutely hilarious. Like you said, I was Ernest Hemingway, and what you had to do is get 5 bombed up mice, whatever, onto the alien ship. We had 4 up there and a couple of non-armed moose. I got beamed up to the ship. I armed that moose. I beamed myself back down and blew up the enemy ship. Sort of. I mean, you don't really blow up the ship; you just disrupt the ritual. But I mean, it was so funny. I mean, it felt like watching a movie. And you guys know I love that. That is such a fun thing.
That's part of the story too, Chris. How did you blow up the moose without without getting yourself blown up too. You must have hid behind some of these aliens that are up there, opened up a compartment of the ship and hid underneath the decks and seen what kind of cargo they were smuggling up there too. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but something crazy.
Or maybe it's magic.
Yeah, could be.
Another thing I want to talk about real quick here is the dice play in this game, because it is a lot of fun. It's a little bit less impactful, I think, to have dice rolling, or it's a little bit less negative to have dice rolling in a co-op game, because it's all about the fun. You're not trying to win. I know we all get a little bit bitter when you get a couple bad dice rolls in a competitive game and you end up losing because of that. But in a co-op game, who really cares? It's all about having a good time. And the dice here are fun. They have these little tentacles that raise your insanity level. And so it's kind of nice getting them, because you want to get a little more insane, but at the same time, get too many of them and you end up dying. You've also got the exclamation points that count as a hit against whatever you're trying to do. And you've got these little stars, and the little stars may or may not be beneficial to you depending on powers that you have. So Tim and I in this game both had this thing called Arcane Mastery, where we would get benefits from those stars if we rolled them, but other players wouldn't necessarily. So I thought the dice, it's not too complicated, but it's just complicated enough to be interesting. And I thought it added a nice little touch that makes this game enjoyable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, dice rolling, just as a general, like going out and just rolling dice for the luck of it, is not usually super fun for me, but they do a good job of balancing how those dice impact different things. I think, again, we talked about the madness track and how that deals with every attempt at whether it's attacking or doing some other skill check, mixing the successes with the failures, with the madness track, with the little stars, which could trigger some abilities. It's a lot of fun. One last thing I wanted to mention about pacing, which I forgot to, is that even though the game can go a little bit long, the fun thing about this game for me is that almost every time I've ever played it, it's been an exciting moment right at the end. It's come down to the last turn or two where several characters just died. There's one person left against the great old one, and he either just manages to get that big roll to knock him out or gets knocked out right at the last turn. The balance here is quite remarkable, that you can manage to have this game roll out in such a way that it almost every time it's tense, it's exciting right at the end. But when it's not, it's usually it's over early. You're 20 minutes in, the game ended quickly because of some bad luck. Then you just reset it up again and start over. But you'll usually get a nice 75 to 90 minute kind of epic experience with a big arc on it. Let's jump into the theme and production here. And Adam already hinted at the theme a little bit, and I think that he's absolutely right. The theme is where this game is at. I think more than any other game I've ever played, it tells a fun story. Every scenario is completely different. It's a different story. It feels like you're doing different things. There's fun little changes to how the game plays with every scenario, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Chris jump in on this one. I don't actually own the game. I'm curious to know, Chris, how many monsters are in each of these seasons? How many investigators are in each of these boxes? And how many scenarios do you have to meddle around with?
Oh, there are so many. I can't give you exact numbers, but I can tell you there's at least a half dozen monsters, a half dozen main monsters, and each of them has a couple of minions that go along with them. You've got something like 30, maybe more, more than 30 options for your character that you're going to play with, all which are slightly different. And then there's, how many is it, Tim? How many episodes per season?
So I think the season one had, I think it was 8 episodes, and season 2 had about the same. And then there was the Unspeakable box, which was the original Kickstarter kind of exclusive content, and it had 3 special episodes. And in fact, the one we talked about tonight, which was kind of a spoiler because all this stuff is going to be a little bit different when you bust it out of the box. This was one of the Unspeakable episodes. So if you don't own that Kickstarter exclusive stuff, you wouldn't run across this particular scenario.
Okay. And I can't overstate the degree to which every episode is different. It's not just like, oh, a little different monster, but you're trying to do the same thing. Today we were trying to blow up mooses. There's another episode where you're trying to put out fires in a laboratory. There's another episode where you're trying to unmask spy cultists at a party. I mean, there's all these things going on, and each episode box comes with little chits that do different things depending on the scenario, and completely different instructions depending on the scenario. And so it is a massive amount of stuff that you can get out of this. I mean, I really think there's so much replayability here. I mean, as long as you like the basis of it. If you don't like the basis of it, then obviously it's not going to be a super thrill to play all these different scenarios. But if you do like it, you're not going to get bored of it, because even if you get a couple of different tries at a scenario, if you're starting to get bored of it, or if you've done all of them and you want to go back through them again, maybe, but want something different, play it with a different investigator, play it with a different monster. There's a lot of different things you can swap out to switch things up and keep it interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I would say that's my only complaint about the game is that there are all these scenarios, but there's nothing tying them together. And I think it's missing just a little bit. It's fun to bust out a scenario, but you kind of want a full story here. There's a lot that could be connected here. If there was just a little bit of carryover from what you did in one episode would carry over to another episode, I would really appreciate that. And I think they could even do that like as a add-on expansion that kind of connects some of these things, give you something to like collect benefits or get negatives depending on how you did in previous scenarios. So I would like to see that in the future, but it doesn't work that way. That said, though, I have played, like Chris, I've played several of the early scenarios multiple times, still having fun with them when I do. It's modular enough, things change enough with the different monsters that come out and the different investigators that you use. But it's so fun every time you explore a new episode where it's completely different. Now, let's talk about the production a little bit. Obviously, this is a CMON game. They're known for their cool sculpted minis, and this is a great example of it. They're all cool. There's a ton of them in the box. I think, again, with this first couple seasons in the original Kickstarter campaign, there's 5 different great old ones total. Each of those have a couple of minion monsters with them. But then there's probably 6 different unique minion monsters or different types of monsters in each of the seasons. And there's also like 10 investigators in each of these boxes. So all minis, different sizes, different sculpts. The artwork on all the cards is cool as heck to me. Like it all fits perfectly with this, with this brand, this Cthulhu brand. It's all creepy art, but it's colorful. It's kind of fun. The artwork on all the characters is cool. And the investigators, I think, is something worth focusing on because each of them has, they're kind of funny, quirky characters. They all have a little quote next to their name that, kind of gives you their personality. But if you flip over this player board, each of them has like a backstory on the backside, and it's just there for flavor. But it's fun to read that before you start playing and get a sense for who the character is. It's almost like Adam said, it's almost like a role playing game, but you're not. It's got a set of rules. You don't get to just make things up, but it feels like that type of story in the game because of all this production and because of all the little details they put into it.
Yeah, it's like a guided role playing or something like that. Tim, you mentioned the different size of the minis. Did you guys see the Parks and Rec where they had the child size drink was the actual size of a child? Isn't isn't this isn't there some version of Cthulhu A Death May Die where you could get the Cthulhu that's like a 2 foot high and you can like chunk it out there on the board? Is that this game?
Yeah, that was the Relier Rising scenario, which is apparently just one scenario, but it uses this 2 foot tall mini, and it's supposed to be like the season finale, where here comes Cthulhu, he's back and he's ready to rock things, and you actually play the game. The board is the mini, and the mini is the board. So I think that is so cool, and I sort of okay. So here's some cognitive dissonance for you. I so regret not having bought that when it came out in the first Kickstarter. And I've talked about that probably a dozen times. And Tim has, kind of goaded me about it. And he was the one who convinced me to not do it in the first place. So just for, giving credit where credit is due.
Shame on you, Tim.
And well, now here it is, season 3, and it's out again. And I don't know if I should do it. It's a lot of money. It seems so cool, but man, so expensive for one scenario. I don't know what to do.
Chris, you're an amateur board game reviewer. You have to get that thing.
You got to hear about it. No, totally. That is really interesting. I'm fascinated by that because it is this huge, seriously 2 foot tall plastic chunk of plastic. It looks awesome. I've seen it in person. My local game store has one painted up on their display shelf. So I've seen how huge it is. It's awesome. But it is just for one scenario. And it's like, how many times are you going to play that scenario? So you're going to get an $880 hunk of plastic for one scenario. But I'm really interested to know how that scenario plays out. Like, how did they use this big chunk of plastic as the game board? Yeah, it's an interesting choice. As you mentioned, the current Kickstarter that's going right now for season 2, they've got it as an add-on. And I think I'm going to skip on it, but mainly just because I just don't have space for. I don't want to display. Listen, like I'm kind of closeted, like a closeted nerd.
You're fully out, Tim.
I don't want to display a huge Cthulhu plastic mini on my shelf.
Fully out.
even though my board games are out there.
I've seen your giant house. That's nonsense. You have plenty of space for it. You have plenty of space where you don't even have to have it out for the public to see. Just saying.
It's kind of true, Chris. I don't know. Well, anyway, so do you guys have anything else on the production or theme?
Yeah, so a couple ideas. We can pool our money. We can send $60 each to Chris's direction, and he can buy the giant child-size mini. And then, along with the production, I want to talk about the sense of humor in this game. We're hinting at it. This game has a great sense of humor on the cards and on the scenarios. There's just the sayings, and it's well written. It's not hokey. It's subtle. It doesn't try to go for the cheesy joke. It just the dialogue all fits, and it doesn't seem awkward. It's just a nice, well written game that doesn't take itself too seriously, which is very easy to appreciate.
Yeah. Overall, just a great package in this game.
What about setup time? You guys were mentioning that setup time could be an issue.
No, I mean I think the setup time is heavy enough, but it's not too bad for me. I've got dumb euros that take longer to set up, and this is at least an interesting reason to have the modular setup. So the setup has not bothered me in any of the games that I've played, but it's a bit of an effort.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a little bit of a downer, but it's worth it.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's talk about the final question here, and that is, would you request to play this game again? And I'll start. I really like Cthulhu Death May Die. It's the only game I've actually really enjoyed playing co-op, even though I think at 4 players, like we played it tonight, like Adam said, there's a little bit of extra downtime. It's not bad. I still had fun doing this thing with you guys, but I think playing with like 2 or 3 players is a good way to play it co-op because it goes a little quicker. But I actually really like playing it solo. I think that's where it is most fun for me. Play with 2 investigators and still get to enjoy this experience. So for some reason, this one hits for me. Most co-ops don't. I really like it. There is a Kickstarter on right now, and I'll just mention I'm planning to back it as well, although I keep wondering why I'm doing that since I haven't played through all my season 2 content yet, although I plan to soon. But I will talk about some of the extra modular components that they're adding into the Kickstarter after we finish this chat, and that might give you some idea why I'm interested in it. But what about you, Adam? Would you request to play Cthulhu Death May Die?
I think in the right scenario, I would request to play this one again. I think after a couple heavy games where you're thinking and your brain is cooking, this would be a perfect kind of, I don't know what the right word is, kind of a calm down or kind of take a breath and just have fun and roll some dice and let your brain ease back into a nice spot before going into day 5 of a Palm Springs gaming convention and having Outlive come out and just having the worst morning of your entire life. Maybe a Cthulhu Death May Die be a nice refresher before too many heavy games in a row.
Now, Adam, you had said in the past that you had I think this is the lowest ranked game in the past on BGG for you. You had it ranked like a 2. I looked at your collection at one point, and you had one bad scenario. So that sounds like a little bit of an upgrade from a 2 on the Board Game Geek ranking system. Was tonight's play different than your last one?
Yeah, this is a bit of redemption for Cthulhu Death May Die for me. The first game, there was one player specifically who wanted no part of it. I don't know why he decided to play, but he was basically trying to commit suicide in the game by, just making the dumb move and going to the dumb spot and hoping not trying to mitigate bad dice rolls or anything. So he was just trying to get out of it, and it really ruined the game for the rest of us there. I didn't get to see the fun of it or the joy of it. And it was just a sour experience for everyone at the table. The guy who brought it and taught the game, he felt horrible. His partner felt horrible. I felt horrible. And the other guy was like, I'm going to go play whatever game now. So that was disappointing. And this was big redemption for Cthulhu Death May Die.
That's awesome.
Wow. What a depressing scenario. I mean, that would ruin any game.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think just, and I know this isn't going to happen with most groups and not the right groups, but I think that's one of the challenges with co-op, right? It's kind of group dependent. You can't just play your own game into the way you want to. You have to be a little dependent on how much other people are quarterbacking and, telling you what to do, how much they're enthusiastic about it, how much they're bummed about it. Like, playing cooperative, you have to be playing with the right people that are in the right state of mind for you to enjoy it as well. So it's a good pointer.
Well, for me, this is definitely a game I would request to play again. In fact, just from playing it tonight, it's made me want to bust out my physical copy and play it again just because this game is so much fun. And my family likes it, and I like it, and it's a great game that I can play solo. So absolutely, I would want to play this one again. But I want to go back one quick second to mechanics. I know that we're way past that, but I don't want to give the sense that this is a flawless game, because there is one thing that did kind of stick in my head as we were playing it tonight that bothered me a little bit. And that is when you get to the Mythos cards. Those are the cards that basically the Automa makes the monsters do various things. It started to feel a little grindy to me, because so many of them are just put a bunch of monsters out, move monsters towards you, bunch more monsters come out, then the monsters come towards you. There's so much of that that was very similar. It reminds me of Nemesis, where there were the event cards at the end of each round, but they were so different. It might be a fire breaks out in one area, or there's this vast variety of things that might happen in Nemesis and those event cards that could be good, could be bad, could be neutral, lots of stuff. This felt a little bit more linear. There's a little bit more sameness there. And it didn't kill the game by any means. I mean, I still think this is a great game, but that's the one part that I don't really enjoy, is I don't get a thrill out of flipping that card over and seeing what interesting thing happens, because it's pretty basic. It's not that interesting. But going back to the overall question of would I ask to play it again? Absolutely. I'm planning on taking it out and playing it again here sometime in the very near future.
Chris, are you thinking about back in this season 3, or are you out? Are you good with the content you've got?
I think the content that I've got is going to last me a long time. I don't play solo or with my family enough that I really need it. And Adam's gesturing with this, hands apart, like there's this giant mini in his hands. If there's anything that I do back this for, is going to be to get that giant mini. I haven't decided yet. I have a huge case of FOMO here, and I don't want to be sorry. I don't want to be sorry I didn't back it, and I don't want to be sorry I did back it. So what's a boy to do?
All right, well, let's talk about that new Kickstarter right now, just briefly, just in case. I think the Kickstarter ends about 2 days or 3 days after this episode drops. So if you listen to it early and you're wondering about backing it, maybe this will be helpful for you. Otherwise, probably not too much. But I thought it had some pretty interesting things. First of all, this game is very modular, as we talked about. And basically what they added with Season 3 is a whole bunch of new scenarios, a whole bunch of new monsters, a whole bunch of new investigators. And most of this stuff, the great old ones and the investigators, can be just swapped around. They can use with the other content, and the investigators from that content can be used in this. So it's all very similar. But they also added a couple more things that add some more modularity that can be used with the other expansions. And there are 2 modules they added here that I'm really excited about. One of my complaints about the game as you're going through the scenarios is that each scenario kind of has its own set of monsters that you work with. And you only see those monsters on like 2 scenarios. So the great old ones get swapped around, but the little individual monsters are usually only going to be used once or twice. And so, that's fine, but it feels a little bit of a waste. You got all these great minis, and maybe that could be more modular where they fix that. They added this new module called the Unknown Monsters dashboard. The way this works is that you're now going to have this little board that sits next to the great old one dashboard, and it has 2 slots for unknown monster cards. So you'll just randomly deal 2 unknown monsters, and those are going to be any mix of monsters from previous scenarios, from scenarios they're not using right now. Each of those monsters has the same dice rolls, the same abilities and everything. And then you're going to add a couple of their cards into the Mythos deck. So now the Mythos deck is not only going to have the scenario cards and the great old one cards, but it's going to have some of these unknown monster cards that will specifically bring, summon these types of monsters, have them attack you, things like that. And so now you've got this bigger variety of things that can be added into any scenario. And that's really cool. The one other thing on that little sideboard is that it also adds a little end of turn summary at the top, which is kind of missing. It's not a hard thing to keep track of, but it's something you kind of have to check once in a while. And it reminds you to, check the discard pile and, check the Mythos deck. And here's what happens. Here's how you do upkeep. So it adds a little bit of a reminder there. So that's nice. The problem with this unknown monster dashboard is that it makes the game a little bit harder. And it's already a pretty balanced and hard game. So they added this other modular expansion called Artifacts. Basically what happens, everybody starts with an artifact, which gives you one unique ability. It's unique to you, and they're fun. They seem really fun and interesting. And then they've got the extra benefit that if you hit your 3rd sanity threshold, you hit that 3rd sanity mark, you flip it over and it becomes more powerful. So just like your investigator does over the course of the game, if you get your insanity up, you're going to get more powerful. But these are going to be flexible. They're every game you're going to have a different special ability with each investigator, and these kind of counteract the toughness of the plug and play enemies, the unknown monster dashboard. I love both of these modules. I think they're a great fit to just add some more unique variability with the game. Didn't really need it, but I do like that those monsters get to be used, and I like the extra abilities. They seem really fun from what I've seen on them. Some of the latest add-on expansion that they just added, where some of these artifacts that you can get that you can start with are pets, and the pets come with their own minis. And the minis, when the pets, when their card gets flipped over, the minis look meaner, and so you actually swap out the nice mini with the meaner mini. So of course the campaign's not even over yet, but Command started to add some of these add-on things you can pay for, like these pets. There's some additional great old ones that you can add on. So a lot of fun content here, but I think they're really sticking with the modular spirit of Cthulhu Death May Die and what Eric Lang and Rob Davio put together here. And this all seems like a great fit. So for this reason alone, I wanted the additional content anyway, but for this reason, I'm definitely going to back this, or I'm pretty sure I'm going to back it. And I am also excited because they are adding on the unknown, or what was the first Kickstarter,
The Unspeakable
the
box?
Unspeakable box, yeah, which was the original Kickstarter exclusive box, which I don't have. They're making that available, so I'm excited to get some of the new the characters and the scenarios that were in that. So yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and back this because I do really like the game a lot. I've played through most of the season 1 and season 2 campaign content, although I'm happy to go back to it. I think it's always fun to revisit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to everything that this brings. So it gives you a little sense for what's coming in this season 3 Fear of the Unknown campaign. And this will be available, other than some of the Kickstarter exclusive stuff they're offering. This will be available in retail when this comes out in a year or two. So even if you're hearing this later on, it might be something worth watching for.
One thing that I noticed, Tim, may have absolutely no impact on gameplay whatsoever, but Eric Lang not being with CMON anymore was not affiliated with Season 3. This was Rob Davio in Marco, Portugal. And so I'm just curious to see, once we start getting to try this, or you get it and you try it, if you think that there's anything that's changed substantially between seasons 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, sure. And I read the I think Rob Davio, right, what he brings, he's kind of known for legacy and story-driven games. And I think that's what he brought to the game, where Eric Lang brought some of the streamlined, interesting mechanisms. I bet Rob Davio kind of brought a lot of that story. So it's cool to see him back. But Marco was the developer on the original game. So he had his hand in the original production. Now he's the designer on it.
Okay.
So, I read some of his design diaries. I got to watch an interview with him. And I don't expect that we're going to see a lot of difference in tone or feel here, other than, again, some of the modularity and what's unique in these specific scenarios. I don't expect to see much different. I think if you like the original, you'll like this. If you didn't like the original, this is probably not going to change your mind. All right, cool. Well, I think that'll wrap up our chat on Cthulhu Death May Die. Maybe in 2.5 more years, we'll play another cooperative game on the show and cover it. But until then, let's jump over to some games that have been on our table, a Cthulhu Death May Die themed cocktail, and some future takes. All right, welcome back, Chris. What do you have for us this week?
All right, guys, you ready? Fung Lui Magluwa Naf Cthulhu Railie Waganagal Fatagan.
That was great.
Yeah. And you might reasonably be asking, what exactly is Chris talking about? Well, the answer comes to us from H.P. Lovecraft, of course, on whose work Death May Die is loosely based. So Lovecraft translated this phrase from an ancient language to mean, in his house in R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. To which you might also reasonably say, okay, well, what about that? Well, I'm glad you asked. According to the mythos, when the great city of R'lyeh sank into the Pacific Ocean, Cthulhu sank with it. And now he's down there, basically napping, and waiting for our cultist friends to wake him up so that he can destroy the world. I'm sure that right now there are probably folks out there way geekier than I am who are saying, first of all, you pronounce that phrase terribly. And second, that I'm way oversimplifying things. So for Cthulhu to return, there needs to be certain rituals. The stars need to be aligned in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then R'lyeh will rise. All that's completely legit. And I humbly beg your nerdy indulgence. In any event, Cthulhu being dead and Cthulhu sleeping mean more or less the same thing in Mythos land, hence the line by Lovecraft's mad poet Abdul al-Hazred, That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die. Voila. That, my friends, is where we get the name of tonight's game. So that was a long detour to get us to our cocktail for the evening, which is called the Cthulhu Waits Dreaming. This drink falls into this kind of weird intersection in the Venn diagram of gaming, cocktails, Cthulhu, and wait for it, tiki culture. Yeah, believe it or not, this is actually not a negligible intersection. It's a real thing. I can't explain it, but I do really enjoy it. Another part of this intersection is the source of this recipe. It's a company called Horror in Clay that makes horror-themed cocktail mugs. They are awesome. They got a bunch of Lovecrafts, including Cthulhu, the King in Yellow, and one with a clever name of the Innsmouth Fog Cutter. They also dabble in Edgar Allan Poe, along with, for example, a rum barrel themed on the short story, The Cask of Amontillado. So I always have my Cthulhu mug out when I'm drinking one of these. The recipe is actually a little bit tough to find, but if you Google it, Cthulhu Waits Dreaming Cocktail, you'll find it on Horror in Clay's blog. Takes a little bit of extra effort to find it, but it is well worth it. And for any fan of mid-20th century tropical cocktails, this one is going to be right up your alley. And as a nod to its subject matter, it actually includes in the recipe a very small amount of brine from Cthulhu's oceanic tomb. But you can feel free to substitute a little bit of salt mixed with water if that's what you happen to have nearby. So grab your Cthulhu mug, fill it up with this drink, and you'll be photogening your Rillier with the best of them.
Nice, Chris. You know what I love? The brine in there. I've had some beers or cocktails that use a little bit of saltiness or like kind of an ocean flavor in it, and it's unique enough to. It doesn't sound appetizing, but it's actually delicious. I love the little extra taste there.
I think it's actually a little more symbolic than than a real ingredient in this drink. You actually use it as a wash. So folks who have made a what's the name of it? The Sazerac before, where you wash your glass with absinthe before you pour in the whiskey. In this one, you wash it with the salt water. So not even entirely sure I could taste it, but it sure is cool knowing it's in there.
Chris, I can't believe a Cthulhu tiki drink actually exists. I feel like this is where you live. You said there's maybe some more of these. I feel like this has got to be your jam, man. I feel like we got to have a night of Cthulhu board game themed cocktails that are real.
I'm always down for that.
Let's just do a weekend where we play like Arkham Horror, the card game, and Cthulhu Death May Die, and Australia, and just drink Cthulhu themed cocktails.
All right, sign me up.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump into and talk about some games that have been on our table this week. And I'm going to start out here. I've actually got 2 games to talk about this week, so I'll kick off one and then we'll circle back around to me. The Kickstarter for the Everdell Complete Collection is in the process of getting shipped to backers. I've received mine. I think many people have at this point, but there's still probably some that haven't. And what this was is that, Everdell's been out for several years. There's about 5 expansions for it at this point. And so the last Kickstarter they did about a year and a half ago was for the 2 final expansions, which include the Mistwood expansion and the New Leaf expansion, but they also had a large box, a large storage solution for all of the Everdell content. So I had all the previous expansions and everything, and I just got the big box and I got the 2 new expansions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the big box today and a little bit about the Mistwood expansion. The Mistwood expansion is unique in that it is made to be kind of a more advanced solo mode, but it can also be mixed in and played kind of a competitive add-in opponent for the game. So I'll talk about that a little bit. First, on the big box, this is the largest box I've ever seen, largest game board box I've ever seen. This is significantly larger than the Anacrity Infinity box, significantly larger than a Gloomhaven normal size box. So this is a huge box, but I can't say it is a great storage solution. It took a little bit for me to figure out how everything went in the box. The only thing you have as a reference when this comes is on the back of the box. It does kind of show a diagram of which trays go in where. So it took me about an hour to kind of go through all my old content and the new content and try to figure out what trays they go into. But once you have it figured out, it's a pretty cool solution. It's modular. There's about 5 thin plastic trays stacked on one side where you put like the boards in one of them. You put all the different critter meeples in one of them. You put a whole bunch of different content in different pieces. All the resource components are in this nice covered tray. And there was even this add-on you could get, which I did, which are these little resource cups that fit thematically. Like the one you put the stones in is a little mine cart, and the one you put, you put coins in, a little acorn and things like that. So those go right in this one tray. You put the resource in them, you put this plastic lid on top of it, and you can store it vertically. You can shake it upside down. It all stays in there perfectly. So really nice storage from that perspective. Then you fit the tree on top of one of these trays. You take it apart and fit it on top. So that's one half of this box. On the other half is in the bottom, a place to put a bunch of these little cardboard structures from the Pearlbrook expansion, so that you can leave them put together in the box. But on top of that is a nice tray with a couple card segments, some for large cards, some for thinner cards, so that you can, and they've got it comes with dividers for each of the different sets. You can keep your expansions separately, keep them separate. It all works really great. Setting up and tearing down goes much quicker now than it used to. But the box is massive, so it's a lot. It's like when I think about taking a game on vacation. Well, Everdell's never coming with me anymore. They used to, but there's no way in heck this is coming in my luggage at this point, or maybe even to the game store. But at home, it's a great fit. So that's the complete collection. It comes with a couple extra things too. One of which I really wanted to highlight, and that is that in the base game of Everdell, it comes with 8 of these farm cards. Farms are important. They're referenced on a lot of other cards. It's one of the types of cards you can build in your village. Well, they added this little expansion pack that replaces the 8 original farm cards that were all the same, with 8 unique farm cards that have slightly different art, slightly different costs, slightly different abilities on them. So I took out the old farms, I put the new ones in, and that's such a fun change to the game. It makes you feel like you're getting different opportunities to do different things depending on what you actually want to build in your city, instead of saying, hey, I'll just take that farm because I need it to trigger some other cards. So that was really cool. They also replaced the husband and wife cards from the original box with these gatherer and harvester cards. You basically aren't stuck with this heteronormative couple in the game. If you can treat the harvester and gatherer any type you want to. That was a nice touch. And so all the new cards referenced, and they gave you replacement cards. If you want to swap out your husband and wife, you can do that in here. So that was cool. So that's kind of what's in the big box. But what I really want to talk about tonight really quickly is the Mistwood expansion. This is the solo mode for it. I was a play tester on this solo mode, and I worked with the designers Rob Bell and Chrissy Pesky when it was in development, and got a chance to play with this quite a bit. So I'm pretty familiar with it. But I had a lot of fun playing with it. But this is the first time I've touched it for about a year and a half. Got to play with the new components, so the finished version of it. And I have to say, it's great. This is the only way I'll play Everdell solo again. The original Rugwort solo mode that came in the base box was fine, but it was one of those solo modes where you had to kind of play the game differently in order to be competitive. This one, you can play your normal game of Everdell. You're playing against an opponent, which is this huge spider, and it's kind of clever. It's got a little deck of cards. You flip over a card and either takes one of its little baby spiders and puts it out in a spot to block it, or it takes the huge spider and puts it in one of the meadow areas of the board, blocks one of the cards, and that card doesn't refill for the end of the round. So it's clever production. It works really well. It's really easy to run. I would say it takes a few minutes to kind of understand all the actions that the card has to do, but it literally took me like 20 minutes to kind of refresh myself on the rules, and I was in and playing, and then could set up and play another game without having to look at the rule book at all. There's some nice player boards for the automated opponent. Nightweave is what she's called, and it has all of the reference rules written right on the player board, so you don't have to open the rule book once you have a sense of how it plays. So that was the Mistwood expansion for Everdell. If you're a solo player, I highly, highly recommend it. It also comes with a couple other promo cards that you can mix in with your main set, and it comes with a whole bunch of different ways to play. Like you can just play, with your base game, but it comes with some extra personality cards, which will every game make the big spider act a little bit differently. When you place it in the middle of the board, when you take cards around her, then they have different effects or different negative things. There's also this plots, and I think it's plans decks that will kind of change up the abilities that your opponent has. So a lot of variability in that, but there's also rules for playing it with all the other expansion content. And I'm really excited to dig into the next expansion, New Leaf, and play solo with that some more as well. So once I have a chance to dig into New Leaf a little bit more and spend some time with it, I'll come back and report on that. But I would say if you're a solo player and you like Everdell, pick up the Mistwood expansion. It's great. If you're not a solo player, you probably don't need to bother with it. You can play it. You add it into your competitive games as kind of a third opponent. But I probably wouldn't bother if I were you. But for a solo player, this is an absolute must in the Everdell world.
So, Tim, 2 comments there. One is I appreciate that they reduced some of the heteronormativity of this, but it is a little bit sad to me that they still see fit to traffic in spider stereotypes. So there's that. Second, I've seen the Scythe Legendary box, and I have a hard time believing this is bigger than that. Because you can like fit an adult man in that.
This is a lot bigger than the Scythe Legendary box. The Anachrony Infinity box was bigger than the Scythe
Jeez.
Legendary box, and this is bigger than the Anachrony Infinity box, quite a bit bigger. So yeah, and there's not a lot of empty space in there either, which is what I'm surprised by. It's just that there is a lot of content, and they packed it nicely, right? You have easy trays that they kind of made it in a way where everything's accessible. It's easy to put away, and that's one of the important things of a good storage solution. If you just packed a lot of stuff in a big box, that was probably my biggest complaint with the Scythe Legendary box, is that there really isn't a storage solution there, right? It's just a bigger box to put everything into.
Oh.
So you still have to put everything in baggies or put everything in small boxes or buy an aftermarket thing. This takes care of all that, but you're using space up to have that nice compartments within those storage trays and things like that. So is it too large? Yeah, probably. We don't need this much space taken up on our shelves, but I do like what it's doing, and it's been really easy. I've played a few games since I got it, and it's been really easy to take out and put away, and I appreciate that. So, and, I'm happy with it.
Well, on my table has not been cute little anthropomorphic creatures, but has been a bunch of tiny square cardboard shits. I'm talking about Space Empires 4X, designed by Jim Crone and published by GMT Games originally in 2011. This is an old school space flying around. Well, it's right there in the name, a 4X game. That's where you're going to expand, exploit, exterminate, and some other X. Explore. Thank you. And this game has all of that in spades. What makes it stand out against something like Eclipse, which I think is a very good comparison? Well, in this game, there are tons of tech tracks you can go up. And there's the basic version, which has maybe 7 or 8 different tech tracks. And there's the advanced version, which adds 7 or so more. And most of these tech tracks involve some kind of tactics or ship size or ship technology. So Steve and I have been playing this a bunch over on Board Game Arena. We're in a 4-player game with all of us right now. And I think the game's pretty interesting. If crawling up these tech tracks and trying to counter your opponent and develop a strategy, if space tech tracks are your thing, this is the game for you. So to go back and compare it some more with Eclipse, the different hex tiles, you've got all of those out there. Some of them are a little kind of gotcha-y. There could be a danger one where everything that jumps into that hex is just destroyed. There's black holes. There's asteroid fields. There's nebula. Each of those have different rules for movement and combat of your ships. The chits are used in a nice way here. One side is blank, and opponents won't know what you've built on your planets. So you build these ships, you send them out to explore space, and you know what they are because you built them. You can glance at them whenever you want, but your opponents aren't going to know what they are until they've encountered them or have had some kind of combat with them. So you can build some mines. You can take out ships right away with some mines. Your enemies can build mine sweepers that'll take out a mine sweeper. You can build fighters that'll go along with your carriers. You can build destroyers. You can build cruisers. You can build all kinds of ships. So if naval battles in space is your jam, I think you might enjoy this game. And if low production value is your jam, also take a look at Space Empires 4X. I talked about comparing it with Eclipse a little bit. I think Eclipse does everything a little bit more fun than does Space Empires. You're going to go through the round, everybody's going to take turns until they can't take turns anymore. And then it goes to sort of a production phase, a combat production phase. So very similar to Eclipse. I like the economy a little bit better in Eclipse, where you're sliding the control tokens over. Here you get money, more or less, for the amount of colonies you have and for the amount of material you found in space and brought back to your colonies. That is a little quick and dirty on Space Empires 4X. I'm enjoying playing it, but I think I would take Eclipse anytime over this game. Guys, do you have any thoughts on Space Empires?
I won't lie, Adam. This ugly ass game, when you first got this started, I was not prepared to be impressed, but I've actually been surprisingly enjoying this game. I mean, if you can get away from, put aside the not very attractive production, The game itself is pretty solid, and it's also pretty intuitive. Like, I haven't cracked an instruction booklet on this one yet, and it's not that simple. And yet I've been able to just intuitively kind of figure out the basics of what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. In fact, I think I've had a couple battles that I killed folks, so I was pretty proud about that. But BGA helps on that too, because a lot of that work is done for you. Even just halfway through a game of it, I'm already going, I see what's going on here. I kind of want to play this again so I can take it to the next level and maybe actually read some instructions this time. But it's a pretty good game.
Well, Chris, I hope that you will play it with Steve so he'll stop inviting me, because I've now played two-player games of it and I don't ever want to play it again. This game does everything that I hate about Eclipse without any of the fun things that I actually like about Eclipse. It's not terrible. I mean, it's fine, but it goes way too long. The combat is just a bunch of rolling dice. It's not even as interesting as Eclipse, where you can have different types of weapons and missiles and things like that. You building up your ships is nowhere near as interesting. The tech trees are there, but if you want a great space tech tree game, play Beyond the Sun. If you want a great space 4X game, play Eclipse. This is probably way cheaper, I would guess, because it is just a bunch of really ugly cardboard shits and hexes. But it plays way too long.
It's about $100.
It's how much? $100? Then it's way too expensive.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
No, sorry.
and it just plays way too long. Like, there are some interesting decisions there, but it's like, here's what I found. Okay. And I may just be bad at it. First of all, I think it plays over like 10 rounds or 8 to 10 rounds, depending on the way you're playing. But each round is like 3 movement phases, which are moving every ship you've got around a different space on the board, and then a production thing. So it's like 30 move rounds, but every move round is like you're moving like 5 or 6 different ships. So it's just a whole lot of doing stuff. It's got the randomness that Eclipse does, where you can flip over a tile and you don't know whether you're getting something good or something bad. You have some idea based on where you are on the map what it could be, but sometimes like you can move a couple ships into a space that you're like, the odds are that it's going to be fine, but it happens to be a black hole and you lose all your ships because of a dice roll. And then there's a whole bunch of space in the middle of the board that are most of them are going to be bad. So it's like completely random whether you get 10 resources that are an alien ship you can drag back, or whether you're there's a whole bunch of aliens out there that are going to blow you up or something like that. So it's too much randomness, too long to play. It's ugly. This is not a fun game to me. But again, there are people that I think like the 4X experience more than I do. They could appreciate this. Steve's been loving it. He's like, we got to play this some more. So Chris, I'd be happy for you to take my spot in Steve's 2-player decisions, because I think I'm going to reject the next invite that he sends to me, because it just, every time my turn comes up on Board Game Arena, I'm like, man, I'd rather be doing anything else than clicking through where these ships are going on this space. So that's my take on Space Empires 4X so far.
Like Tim says, some people like boring, dumb, ugly games, right? Yeah.
That's right.
So I got a couple things on my table this week, and the first one is a super duper fun but lightweight game called Can't Stop. And this is an old school, almost a family game that goes back to the 1980s. And it is a stop sign with a bunch of numbered tracks, numbered 2 to 12, and a series of tokens in your color and some placeholder tokens and 2 dice. And all you're doing every turn is you're rolling the 2 dice and then putting a placeholder token on a number that's some combination of whatever the 2 dice are you just rolled. So if you rolled a 3 and a 3, you'd move it up a 6, or 2 3s. Or if you rolled, you roll 7 and a 9, that kind of thing. And you're moving up these tracks. And you have 3 placeholder tokens you can use. And once they're out on the board, those are the 3 tracks you have to move up. And you can roll the dice as many times as you want to, but you have to always be able to move up on at least one track or put a token out. And so there's this huge element of push your luck in it. And oh my goodness, this game is so addictive. I just start rolling those dice or click and roll on BGA, and it's exciting. It's fun. For a simple little game, I'm holding my breath every time I roll those dice. And what a blast that is. It was so much fun playing a couple of games with you guys. I forget which one of you started it, but we were doing it on BGA. That after a game or two, I ordered a copy of it, and now I've got the hard copy at home. I've been playing it with my wife and son. Both of them think it's super duper fun. It's got a little bit of math in it. You're adding up dice and doing some logic and some probabilities in terms of whether you're going to roll again or not. In fact, today at school, my son had a special game day where every kid was allowed to bring like a stuffed animal and a board game, and then kids would have a little bit of time to sit around and play it. And he borrowed Can't Stop from me to bring it in, and he played it with his buddies. So much fun. I love that game, and it's light as all get out, but just an absolute blast.
Yeah, I grew up playing this game, and I didn't recognize the genius of it until coming back to it more recently. And this is the game where when it's my turn on BGA, I'm like, I can't wait. This is so fun, and it never fails, right? Like every time I'm rolling around, I'm like, this is a pretty good move. I'm going to take one more, and that's the one that I bust on every single time. Yeah, I'm having a ton of fun with this one.
Yeah, Chris, I'm with you guys. This game is fantastic. The choices that come out of here, you roll the dice. Are you going to take the 2 7s? Are you going to take a 6 and an 8? Are you going to climb up this? Are you going to take the probability? So it's a lot of probabilities going into it. And you know you're safe with those first couple of rolls because you have those black tokens that you can throw on there. And then it goes, do I keep going, or do I pause right here and put the pressure on the other people playing the game? And then once some of the numbers get taken out, the 7's gone. Now this is getting a lot harder. And now the 6 is gone. The 8's gone. Someone took the 10. How did someone get the 10? And you're just looking about how you're going to make this happen, and you can see your chances just waning as Tim grabs a 7. Then he's got the 4. Somehow he got the 4 all the way up, and now you got to push your luck the whole way. And oh my gosh, I got the 5 and the 8 and the 9, and I'm the winner. So what a fun game. Crazy stuff can happen. Such a cool game for such easy to understand mechanics.
Now, the other game I wanted to talk about this week is a game by Vladimir Suchy, and it's called Last Will. And I think this was relevant because just last week we talked about our favorite designers, and I mentioned this is one of Suchy's games that I didn't get a chance to play before, but now I have. So I'm going to talk about it really quickly. Last Will is a really cool theme. If you ever saw the movie from the 80s, Brewster's Millions, with Richard Pryor and John Candy, the concept being that Richard Pryor could inherit like hundreds of millions of dollars from his rich uncle or grandpa or something like that, except his uncle says, I think you're just going to blow it all. So instead, I'm going to give you a little bit of you have to kind of go through this little contest first. First, you have to be able to spend $30 million without just giving it away in a month. You're going to work so hard to spend this money. You're going to hate doing it. So you're never going to want to spend money again. So if you can do that successfully, you're going to get the whole rest of the fortune. And Last Will basically takes that exact theme. It says that your 4 cousins, you've got a rich uncle that just died. He said, I made all this money, but never enjoyed life. I want you to learn how to enjoy life first before you get this money so that you know what it's like. So each of the players plays one of these cousins. And at the start of the game, you flip over a card and it tells you how much money you all start with. In our game, we started with 120 pounds, which I think would be like 120,000 pounds, but whatever. We had to get rid of 120 bucks in 8 rounds in order to be successful. If you can get rid of it before the 8th round, you win if you're the only one that goes to the bottom. If you get to the end, whoever has spent the most of their money wins the game. This is a very kind of light to midweight Euro game. Again, really interesting theme. But the concept is that it's a little bit of worker placement and a little bit of tableau building. So what's going to happen on your turn, start of the round, everyone's going to take a space that gives them their starting player position, how many cards they're going to start with, how many workers they get to use that turn, and how many actions they get to take. Sounds complicated. It's really simple. You jump in first, depending who got first player, you place 1 or 2 worker placement tokens, and those are going to either give you the opportunity to buy from certain markets, some more cards to add to your hand. And most of this game is driven by the cards you're getting. 2, it gives you a spot where you can manipulate the housing market. You can change the value of different types of properties, whether they're going to be cost more to buy or be worth less when you sell them. And then after you take those couple worker placement spaces, then everybody simultaneously takes your actions, and your actions are either to play a card out of your hand onto this tableau in front of you. You've got like 5 spaces you can put them in, or to activate one of the cards that are in that tableau. And based on the number of actions you start with, could be between 1 and 4, depending on that turn order bid, you're going to activate these actions. But this is where the theme comes in. So how are you going to blow all your money? You're either going to buy real estate. You want to try to buy it expensive and sell it cheap later on in the game. But while you've got this real estate, it costs money to run, right? If you want to keep this house up, it costs you money to do it. So when you've got a building in your tableau, one of the actions you can take on your turn is to upkeep it. So you're going to spend a certain amount of money. But let's say that your house is going to be even more expensive if you have a lady living there. So there's a set of cards that will get you either ladies, chefs, dogs, or horses. It's a stack of cards. And some of the cards will let you spend more money depending on the right combination of those characters you get. So that's one of the stacks you can pull from. So let's say then I take an action to discard a lady. Now I've got a lady living there. Also, I'm going to discard a horse. I've got a horse there as well. Now, to upkeep this property, it's going to cost a lot more money. So if I can get those things done and then use my action to upkeep that property, I've spent a lot more money. But before the end of the game, I can't have any property left or I'm not going to win. So I also have to sell it, but I want to try to manipulate the housing market so that it's worth less money. And maybe a couple of years I didn't upkeep it, so the property value dropped on it. So there's all these little fun thematic things you're doing to try to make sure that you spend as much money as you can. There's all these event cards you can pick up that when you play them, you blow a lot of money. Like you can take a day boating. So you spend $2 to do that. But if you bring the chef, a lady, and your dog with you, you're going to spend $8. That's how much it's going to cost you to do this event. So in a little bit of a way, it's like a light version of Arc Nova. You've got a bunch of cards that you're going to be pulling from. You're going to try to put the right symbols together, stack them together so that they help you spend enough money. Some of the other cards you can get in your tableau will just, make some of those events cost more, make you better at selling and buying real estate, things like that. Beautiful, cute artwork on this. This feels like what Obsession's production should have been, where, Obsession is very bland. It's got the same kind of era and same style. In this case, your 1880s, estates, they got this beautiful artwork on the estates, this great quirky artwork for all the characters that are in the game, and a lot of kind of humor in the types of events that you're doing. Yeah, if you spend a horse to go to the theater, you spend more money and you can joke around like you're taking your horse to the theater. The game has a great theme. I think it's probably going to get repetitive if you played it multiple times in a row, although I do understand the expansion kind of helps with that. It changes things up, adds more cards to it, because a lot of the cards were pretty similar and a lot of the types of things you're going to do are pretty similar. So I had a lot of fun with my first play. I thought by the 8th round when the game ended, it was starting to feel like kind of repetitive actions. So it didn't blow me away, but I did really enjoy it. I love the theme on it. This is a game I'd like to go back to once in a while, but not too often.
Does it? How does it compete with the other Vladimir Suchi games for you?
I thought it was very interesting. It was a little bit lighter than the other games that he's played, and it was a very different style of game. So, it did have a little bit of worker placement, but that was a minor aspect of it. It didn't feel like his other games that I've played, which was good.
Yeah.
It was nice to see something that was kind of outside of his, it just felt different. It didn't feel like a modern Euro, really. It felt like a kind of a lighter card game that had some Euro trappings in it, and that was fun. It was a nice change of pace.
Well, my last thing for on the table tonight is Agricola, which I'm not going to talk about in any detail because you guys already did a very fine review episode on that. And I agree with so much of what you guys said. But I will note that this is another game by Uwe Rosenberg that has defied all of my expectations, or at least defied the stereotypes of what I think I like in games. It's a sandboxy game with a boring theme where you're cooking pumpkins and building a house and running a farm, but there's something about his games that just reels me in, and I'm not sure what that is. And maybe I think Tim made the comment in the review episode that it was highly thematic, and I think that's actually kind of true here. The theme may be kind of boring, similar to Lorenzo El Magnifico. That was a boring theme, but I didn't think the theme really tied that much into the gameplay. In this game, there's a pretty boring theme, but boy, does it sure work with the gameplay. You have a million different things you can do. All of them have different impacts, and all of them kind of fall into this same rubric of running a farm. You have different ways you can run a farm, but you have to ultimately be able to feed your family and be able to pay your bills and be able to do the things that make your farm function. And so in that sense, it really is a pretty highly thematic game. And similar to A Feast for Odin, which is the other Uwe Rosenberg game that I've played, it's so sandboxy. There's so many different options for things that you can do. And for some reason, despite the fact that they just don't come across as that thrilling, I always find them to be interesting choices. So I don't know what kind of crazy spell Uwe Rosenberg has cast on me, but these games have defied my expectations, and I really appreciate that. I've been playing it now with Tim. I think we're maybe 3, 4 games in, and I don't see myself wanting to stop.
I love that you love it, Chris. And there's a whole bunch more Uwe Rosenberg games that we need to take a stab at. So I'm excited to start exploring them deeper with you. All right. Well, we've got just a couple quick future takes we'll mention. I'm going to start with Slay the Spire. This is a game that I have mentioned in a future takes when it first got announced like a year ago. Slay the Spire is based on a very popular computer game, which is essentially a roguelike deck builder. They took that very popular IP and turned it into a card game. This one feels a little personal because this is designed by Gary Dworetsky. And Gary Dworetsky was the very first interview that we ever had on our show. He had recently put out his game Imperium the Contention, which Adam had backed. And so we chatted with Gary and he agreed to come on and talk with us. And that was way back in episode 10. We were a very young show then, but if you're interested in hearing that interview, go check it out. And what was fun about that is that as we were wrapping up that interview that day and we stopped recording, he told us that he was really excited to share some news about a big hot video game IP that he picked up, but the contract didn't get signed that day, so he couldn't share it with us. And about 2 weeks later, he made an announcement on social media that this is the IP. And I was so excited because I was a huge fan of this game. I was playing the Slay the Spire video game at the time. So I've been watching this for about a year and a half, and the Kickstarter just opened today, and it will still be available for probably about a week or week and a half after this episode drops. If you are interested in Slay the Spire, if you've played it before, I think you're going to see a lot of familiarities here. They used all the same artwork, or at least the same style of artwork that was used on the cards in the video game. The card borders look the same. The graphic design looks the same. Everything looks the same. If you like the game, I think, and you want to play a physical version of it, that's what you're going to get here. If you were hoping for something that was a little bit of a change, something in that world, but felt different, I don't think it's going to be very different. And it's one of the reasons why I'm now a little bit more hesitant to back it, because I don't know that I want to play this physical version when I can open up the app and quickly click into it and just play through it on the app. But that said, it's a very fun game to me. I think this would be fun to do physically. My other concern is that this was turned from a solo only game into a cooperative game, and I can see some of the cards reference how you interact with other players. And so I don't know. It could be fun to play this solo multi-handed still, but I don't really have any interest in playing it cooperatively. So I hope that doesn't take away from the solo experience. The other one tiny concern I have here is that the price on this Kickstarter for what is essentially a card game, a deck builder, the starting pledge is $100. It's like $150 if you want to get the collector's edition. But I can say that there is a lot of content in here. And because a lot of the cards can get upgraded in the game, what they did is they printed them double-sided. And so they've got like 400 premium sleeves in this set. So that way the cards are in a sleeve with a backer on it. And then you just pull the card out and flip it around in order to play with it. And so I'm sure that's where some of the cost came in. I'm sure some of the IP cost had some impact there. I wouldn't say that this is way overpriced for everything you're getting in here, but it is probably a little bit more than I was hoping to play. It is more than I was hoping to pay for what is essentially a solo deck builder. So I'm kind of on the fence about whether I'm going to back this. They're going to start opening up some stretch goals in the next coming days. Again, this just released today. Well, interested to see where those go. And I definitely keep my eye on it. I did reach out to Gary today to ask if I could get access to a tabletop simulator version of it just so I could try it out and maybe talk about it on next week's episode. But I think they're still working on that mod, so it may or may not be available for us to try. I may have some thoughts next week. But that's what I have to say about Slay the Spire. It is a game I've been watching for a long time. I'm mildly interested in backing it still, and I think it's a cool thing that they did here. I'm just not sure if it's enough different from the app for me.
Just some stats, Tim. It's November 1st, 11 p.m. Right now, that's approaching 9,000 backers on the Kickstarter, so it's doing pretty well. A lot of people aren't afraid of that $100 initial pledge plus whatever shipping is going to be. So a big IP, a big following, and it's showing here with the Kickstarter numbers.
Yeah, amazing for Gary for his second Kickstarter, his second design game after Imperium the Contention, I think raised $25,000 or something like that on the Kickstarter. And it's gotten some decent critical acclaim, so I don't know if they've done other printings of it, but this is quite a jump up. And hopefully Gary's holding up okay at this point, probably stressed to all heck. Not sure how he's going to get this thing made and delivered, but good for him. I know he spent a lot more time than he expected to designing it and refining it. And he also, the co-designer listed on it is the video game designer, I believe. So he's clearly been working very closely with the original company that made Slay the Spire and with the designers of that to try to get that same feel to it. So I bet this is going to be a really fun game and a really great production if you're willing to put the $100 into it.
A quick one for me that's on Kickstarter right now is Aqua Garden. Why did I get drawn into this? Strictly because of the cuteness of the little silk screened tokens, little parts, little characters of this game. It's all aquarium themed. You're trying to build your own little aquarium. How are you doing this? You're going for a walk on the beach and ripping the wildlife from its natural habitat and throwing it into your aquarium at home. At least that's the gist of it that I get from here. This is designed by Totsuka Cho and published by Uchibakoya out of Japan. Sorry if I butchered those names. But yeah, go to the Kickstarter, look at this. I'm not sure if I'm going to back it right now. I have it backed, but the price is coming in for the base game and this expansion. It's like up over $100. Do I want to pay $100
Ooh.
for a very lightweight game that's basically set collection? Well, maybe I do if there's an octopus that carries a Coke bottle with a message in it. What? Also, there's a clownfish that slots inside of a sea anemone. Amazing. So just some very amazing craftsmanship with these incredibly beautiful, vibrant silkscreen fish and octopus and pufferfish and whale sharks. And you part of the beach combing is you find trash on the beach and you get points for picking up the most trash and cleaning up the beach. How cool is that? So some neat concepts here, some nautilus. There's something called a mimicus, which I think is a cuttlefish. Did you know there's a thing called a sea bunny? I didn't know that, but there's one in this game. So it looks just cute as all get out. I want to keep scrolling it and just looking at all the different sea life they've been able to come up with and look so amazing and vibrant and real. And I want to just hold these things and play with them and get my kids into board games. So that again is Aqua Garden with the Beachcombing expansion up right now on Kickstarter, and some stats on that about 1,900 backers. Not as big as Slay the Spire, but a decent showing for a smaller publisher out of Japan.
This is interesting. The graphic design makes it a little hard to tell, but it seems like so the main game is like Aqua Garden, but this Kickstarter is mainly for the Beachcombing expansion. But it looks like this game has a whole bunch of expansions that you can pick up here too. There's like the new facility expansion, the sea mimicry expansion, the seaside cottage expansion. Was this a game that's already been published or kickstarted in the past?
Right. So Aqua Garden was published back in 2021, and
Okay.
this is a follow-up Kickstarter with a massive amount of expansions,
Okay.
Tim, like you were saying. So it's a little confusing to figure out what's going on here, but the game is Aqua Garden, and the expansion, among many others, for this Kickstarter is the Beachcombing expansion.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's like $82 with the one expansion.
Add some shipping out of that, you're up at 102
Yeah, the
bucks.
full
Yeah.
complete pledge with all the expansions, $132 plus shipping. And it does, the production's amazing. It's beautiful. The artwork, the minis, everything here is so cool. So I can totally understand why you got hooked into this. Have you read any reviews or watched any reviews on the gameplay? Does it actually seem like something you're going to enjoy?
It looks relatively light. Again, I think the price here is
Hmm.
component and production, and that's going to be worth it to me if it gets my kids into playing board games and engaging in a family event to do around the table. So I have to think about it some more. These are just some of the things that are crossed my mind as I'm considering thinking about this. One thing it does say on the Kickstarter is that age should be 15 and up, but you go and look at the Board Game Geek page and it says ages 8 and up. So big discrepancy there with where they think the mental capacity of a 15-year-old versus an 8-year-old is at, which is a strange one.
No, one thing you got to think about that most people don't realize when they put ages on campaigns or even sometimes on boxes, it has to do with regulation. Because if you market a game towards someone under 14 years old in the United States, and I think UK has similar rules or EU does, that they have to go through extra regulatory processes and like applications and things like that. So most board games, unless they're really targeted at kids, are going to say 14 up, even if they could be played by kids younger than that. So I've heard several designers or publishers talk about that's one of the reasons they just don't go through the hassle because their main market isn't kids. So keep that in mind. Just because something says 14 or 15 up, it does not mean that it can't be played younger.
Interesting. I did not know that.
All right, cool. Well, this is we talked about a lot of stuff today, so let's get this episode wrapped up. Although I did promise we had 2 more really nice reviews on Apple Podcasts last week, and I said I'd circle back and mention them, so I'm going to call those out really quickly. Again, if you like us, if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, we would love it if you would rate and review us on there. It's so fun to read these great comments from people that are enjoying the show. It helps other people find the show. It gives us a little bit of reputation, which we so badly need. So here's a couple people that left reviews for us last week. The first one was from Aaron MB in the US, and a 5-star review titled Great Listen. He said, I have just started listening to BGHT in the past couple of months, but really enjoy it. I appreciate having a range of games since you've covered so many. I like to look and see if you guys have reviewed a game before I do my first playthrough. In fact, I just did that re-listening to Arc Nova. So that's really cool. Yeah, we've got quite a catalog that's built up at this point. Oftentimes I'll have somebody say, hey, you should cover this game. And I'll be like, yeah, just go back to episode 32. We've already done it. So check out our back catalog. We got a lot of games listed out there. At some point, maybe I'll try to put some kind of wiki up so you can search through that quickly. But in any case, thanks, Aaron. Really appreciate that. It was great to hear. The second one that we got that last week was by Cold Brewski in the US. And this was a 5-star review. Best board game podcast this side of the galaxy. That's amazing. I want to know which one is on the other side of the galaxy. I want to check that one out. But he said, easily my favorite podcast of the hobby. I always look forward to the next episode. I really appreciate the honest conversation, the back and forth, and respectful disagreements. I find myself drawn in even when they were talking about games I would never like or play. It has changed how I think about board games. Thank you so much, Cold Brewski. So nice to hear. And it's great to get these. So appreciate it, everybody. I think that will wrap up this episode. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.